In the quiet village of Eldershade, nestled deep within the Carpathian Mountains, life moved at a leisurely pace. The villagers lived simple lives, unaware of the dark secrets lurking beneath their idyllic surroundings. Eldershade was a place where everyone knew each other, and the sense of community was strong. It was a place where mysteries rarely surfaced, and the unknown was often dismissed as superstition. One crisp autumn evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the cobblestone streets, the village prepared for its annual harvest festival. Lanterns were lit, and the air was filled with the scents of spiced cider and roasting meats. Among the crowd was Elena, a young woman with a keen sense of curiosity and a penchant for exploring the unknown. Her friends often teased her for her vivid imagination, but Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss in Eldershade. As the festivities continued, Elena noticed a stranger among the villagers. He was tall, with an air of elegance that set him apart from the humble townsfolk. His pale skin and piercing blue eyes seemed almost otherworldly. Intrigued, Elena decided to follow him, keeping a safe distance as he moved through the crowd with an unsettling grace. The stranger led her to the old, abandoned chapel at the edge of the village, a place shrouded in legends and whispered tales of dark occurrences. Elena hesitated at the entrance, but her curiosity pushed her forward. Inside, the chapel was cold and damp, its once grand architecture now crumbling and overgrown with ivy. The stranger stood in the center, his eyes closed, as if in deep meditation. Suddenly, the air grew colder, and a sense of foreboding washed over Elena. She watched in horror as the stranger's form began to shift and contort. His elegant features twisted into something monstrous, and his eyes glowed with an eerie red light. It was then that Elena realized the truth. This man was no ordinary stranger. He was a vampire, a creature of the night, feeding on the unsuspecting villagers who had never even considered the possibility of such a being in their midst. Elena's heart pounded in her chest as she slowly backed away, but the vampire's eyes snapped open, locking onto her with an intensity that froze her in place. He smiled, revealing sharp, glistening fangs, and took a step toward her. Just as he was about to reach her, a figure emerged from the shadows, a woman, draped in a cloak as dark as midnight. She brandished a silver dagger, and the vampire hissed, recoiling from its gleaming edge. "Leave her be," the woman commanded, her voice steady and authoritative. The vampire snarled but retreated into the darkness, vanishing as quickly as he had appeared. The woman turned to Elena, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and determination. "You must leave this place," she said urgently. "There are things here far more dangerous than you can imagine. Eldershade is not the village it appears to be." Before Elena could respond, the woman pressed the dagger into her hand and disappeared into the night. Shaken but resolute, Elena knew she had to warn the others. But as she made her way back to the festival, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The vampire's presence was a harbinger of something much darker, and Eldershade's unsuspecting villagers were on the brink of uncovering a secret that had been buried for centuries. And so, the intrigue deepened, the shadows lengthened, and the village of Eldershade teetered on the edge of a revelation that would change their lives forever. Elena hurried back to the village square, her heart still racing from the encounter in the chapel. The festival was in full swing, the villagers oblivious to the danger that lurked in their midst. She scanned the crowd for her friends, hoping to find someone who would believe her. "Elena, there you are," called her friend Mara, waving from near the bonfire. "Where have you been? You missed the dance." Elena grabbed Mara's arm and pulled her aside, away from the noise of the celebration. "Mara, you have to listen to me. There's something terrible happening here. I saw a vampire in the old chapel." Mara laughed, but the worrying in Elena's eyes made her stop. "Are you serious? A vampire? Elena, that's just a myth." "No, it's real," Elena insisted. "And there's more. A woman saved me. She gave me this." She showed Mara the silver dagger, its blade gleaming in the firelight. "We need to warn the others. We need to find out who that woman is and what she knows." Mara's skepticism faded, replaced by concern. "All right, let's go find the mayor. He needs to hear this." As they made their way through the crowd, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every shadow seemed to hold a pair of glowing red eyes. Every gust of wind carried a sinister whisper. They reached the mayor's house, and Mara knocked urgently on the door. Mayor Gregor opened it, his jovial expression fading as he saw their anxious faces. "What's the matter, girls?" Elena quickly explained what had happened, showing him the dagger. The mayor's face grew pale, and he glanced around nervously. "Come inside, quickly." Inside, the mayor lit a lantern and closed the curtains. "What you saw, Elena, it's part of an old legend, a legend that most of us thought was just a story to scare children. But if what you're saying is true, then we are in grave danger." He led them to a dusty bookshelf and pulled out an old, leather-bound book. "This is the Chronicle of Eldershade. It contains records of strange occurrences and supernatural events from our village's past." He flipped through the pages until he found what he was looking for. "Here, this speaks of a vampire that terrorized Eldershade centuries ago, feeding on the villagers in secret until a group of hunters drove it away. But it seems the threat has returned." Elena leaned in, reading the ancient text. "We need to find that woman who saved me. She knows something about this. Maybe she can help us." Just then, a loud crash came from the back of the house. The lantern flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The mayor grabbed a shotgun from a nearby cabinet, his hands trembling. "Stay here," he whispered, moving toward the noise. Elena and Mara held their breath, the silence stretching unbearably. Moments later, the mayor returned, his face ashen. "We need to leave. Now." "What's wrong?" Mara asked, fear creeping into her voice. "The vampire," the mayor said, his voice barely a whisper. "It's here?" The three of them hurried out the front door, sticking to the shadows as they made their way back to the festival. They needed to gather as many villagers as they could and warn them of the impending danger. But as they approached the square, Elena noticed something odd. The villagers were standing unnaturally still, their faces blank and eyes glazed over. "They're in a trance," Elena realized, her heart sinking. "The vampire's doing." Suddenly, the woman who had saved Elena appeared beside them, as if out of nowhere. "We don't have much time," she said urgently. "The vampire has enchanted the villagers. We need to break the spell before it feeds on them all." "Who are you?" Elena asked, clutching the dagger tightly. "My name is Sorina," the woman replied. "I come from a long line of vampire hunters. My ancestors drove the vampire away centuries ago, but now it has returned, stronger than ever. We need to destroy it once and for all." "But how?" Mara asked, looking around at the entranced villagers. Sorina pointed to the chapel. "The vampire's lair is beneath the old chapel. We need to lure it there and use the sacred relics hidden in the crypt to destroy it." Elena nodded, her resolve hardening. "Let's do it." Together, they moved through the village, gathering a small group of villagers who had not fallen under the vampire's spell. Armed with torches, silver weapons, and ancient relics from the Chronicle, they made their way to the chapel. As they descended into the crypt, the air grew colder, and the sense of dread intensified. At the heart of the crypt, they found a stone altar, adorned with symbols of protection and banishment. "We need to lure the vampire here," Sorina said, positioning the villagers around the altar. "Once it's within the circle, we can trap it and destroy it." Elena stood at the entrance, her heart pounding as she called out into the darkness. "Come and face us, monster. We know your secret, and we are not afraid." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, from the shadows, the vampire emerged, its eyes blazing with fury. It lunged at Elena, but she dodged, leading it toward the altar. "Now!" Sorina shouted, and the villagers activated the relics, creating a barrier of light that trapped the vampire within the circle. The creature thrashed and screamed, but it could not escape. With a final, desperate effort, Sorina plunged the silver dagger into its heart. The vampire let out a bone-chilling scream before disintegrating into dust. The barrier faded, and the villagers collapsed in exhaustion. But as the dust settled, a sense of unease remained. Sorina approached Elena, her expression grim. "This is not the end," she warned. "The vampire was only the beginning. There are darker forces at play here, and we must be vigilant." Elena nodded, understanding the gravity of their situation. Eldershade was no longer the peaceful village she had known. It was a place of shadows and secrets, where the line between reality and nightmare blurred. And so, with the vampire vanquished but the threat far from over, Elena and her friends prepared for the battles to come, knowing that the true horror of Eldershade had only just begun. The days following the vampire's defeat were tense in Eldershade. The villagers, now aware of the dark forces lurking in their midst, banded together with a newfound sense of solidarity. Led by Elena, Mara, Serena, and Mayor Gregor, they fortified their defenses and began to uncover the hidden secrets of their village. Elena spent countless hours poring over the Chronicle of Eldershade, determined to learn everything she could about the ancient curses and supernatural entities that plagued her home. Serena trained a group of villagers in the art of vampire hunting, sharing her family's knowledge and skills. The old chapel was consecrated once more, its crypt sealed with powerful wards to prevent any further dark magic from seeping out. As winter approached, the village prepared for the longest night of the year, the winter solstice. It was said that on this night, the barriers between worlds were thinnest, and dark forces were at their strongest. But this year, the villagers were ready. On the eve of the solstice, Eldershade was quiet and still. Snow covered the ground, and the moon cast an ethereal glow over the village. The townsfolk gathered in the chapel, now a place of sanctuary and hope. They lit candles, sang hymns, and prayed for protection. Elena, Mara, Serena, and Mayor Gregor stood at the altar, surrounded by the sacred relics they had discovered in the crypt. Each held a weapon blessed with ancient magic. As the clock struck midnight, a chill wind blew through the chapel, extinguishing the candles. The air grew thick with tension as the villagers held their breath. From the darkness, a low growl echoed through the chapel, followed by the appearance of ghostly figures, remnants of the vampire's dark influence. But this time, the villagers were not afraid. Serena raised her dagger, its blade glowing with a holy light, and the villagers followed her lead, their weapons shining brightly. "By the power of light and love, we banish you," Serena cried, and the villagers echoed her words. The ghostly figures hissed and recoiled, their forms dissipating in the face of the villagers' collective strength. Elena and Mara joined hands, their voices strong and unwavering as they chanted the ancient incantations. The relics at the altar pulsed with energy, creating a protective barrier around the chapel. One by one, the dark spirits were driven back, their presence growing weaker, until they vanished completely. As the final wisp of darkness faded, the candles relit themselves, bathing the chapel in a warm, comforting glow. A sense of peace settled over Eldershade, and the villagers cheered, embracing one another. The threat had been vanquished, not by a single hero, but by the unity and courage of the entire community. Elena looked around at her friends and neighbors, feeling a profound sense of pride and gratitude. Serena approached her, a rare smile on her face. "You did well, Elena. Your strength and determination saved this village." Elena shook her head. "It wasn't just me. It was all of us, working together. Eldershade is safe because we stood united." In the days that followed, life in Eldershade began to return to normal. The villagers rebuilt and restored, creating a stronger and more resilient community. The chapel became a symbol of their victory and a reminder of the power of unity and hope. Elena continued to study the Chronicle, determined to preserve the knowledge and protect her home from any future threats. Serena remained in the village, training a new generation of guardians to ensure that Eldershade would always be ready to face the darkness. As spring blossomed, the village celebrated a new festival, a festival of light to commemorate their triumph over the shadows. Lanterns were lit, and the air was filled with laughter and music. Elena stood at the edge of the crowd, watching her friends and neighbors dance and sing, their faces bright with joy. Eldershade had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. And while the shadows would always be a part of their history, the villagers knew that as long as they stood together, they could overcome anything. And so, in the heart of the Carpathian Mountains, the village of Eldershade thrived, its people united by the strength of their spirits and the power of their light.